Have you ever seen someone's life flip from humiliation to triumph in the span of a single hour? Picture this: a confident black woman, impeccably dressed, strides onto a plane at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, only to be met by suspicion, hostility, and an explosive confrontation that ends with airport security dragging her off in handcuffs. Passengers gawk, tensions skyrocket, and her reputation is shredded. But what happens next will leave you speechless. Within the very next hour, she holds all the cards and delivers a stunning, career-shattering blow that no one saw coming. This is the unforgettable tale of fate, justice, and karma. Phoenix Marshall brushed a stray curl away from her face as she hurried through the bustling concourses of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The overhead speakers blared flight updates, and she navigated the swirling crowd like a seasoned traveler, weaving between families with strollers and business professionals with rolling briefcases. Her job often took her around the world, but today's flight to Chicago wasn't just another trip. It was supposed to be her personal day, a rare weekend off to spend time with her sister Danielle and her newborn niece. Phoenix was excited, her heart brimming with joyful anticipation. At only 34, Phoenix was already a rising star in the consulting industry. She had built a formidable reputation for transforming struggling companies into profitable powerhouses. Her rebranding strategies and emphasis on inclusive business models made her a sought-after name among international corporations. Yet behind that polished resume lay a story of perseverance. Phoenix had grown up on the south side of Chicago in a modest household, working 2 jobs to help her parents. She earned scholarships, excelled in her undergraduate studies, then tackled a grueling MBA program, determined to break every barrier placed in front of her. Stepping off the moving walkway, she smiled as she recalled the day she secured a seat on the board of a major tech conglomerate. It felt surreal that she now had the resources to buy first-class tickets whenever she traveled, something she wouldn't have imagined in her teenage years. Still, she kept her successes humble. Phoenix believed in giving back, donating to community programs in underprivileged neighborhoods and mentoring young women. Her experiences taught her that every path is shaped by opportunity, and how quickly one can seize it. But as Phoenix neared Gate B19, tension prickled up her spine. A small commotion was brewing near the gate. A line of disgruntled passengers stood fanning themselves with boarding passes, while a frazzled gate agent tried to troubleshoot a computer glitch. Behind the counter, 2 additional agents whispered urgently to each other, occasionally glancing at Phoenix and a couple of other first-class passengers. Phoenix offered a reassuring smile to a gentleman in front of her, who looked about ready to boil over with frustration. She turned to the gate agent. "Is there a delay?" she asked politely. Noticing the time had already passed, their supposed boarding. The agent stiffened, forcing a polite grin. "Just a moment, ma'am. We're handling a slight technical issue. We'll begin boarding shortly." Phoenix nodded. She glanced down at her phone, noticing she had a few missed calls from the office. Even on a weekend, her time was never truly her own. She tapped a quick text message to her assistant, letting them know she would be in the air soon. Moments later, the glitch was apparently resolved. The gate agent cleared her throat, tapped the microphone, and announced the start of the boarding process. First class and priority passengers lined up first. Phoenix, relieved, pulled her carry-on behind her. She felt the day's exhaustion wearing on her, and she longed to sink into the plush seat. Maybe watch a movie and tune out the world for a couple of hours. As she boarded the aircraft, a standard Boeing 737, operated by a fictional carrier, let's call it Unity Air Phoenix, noticed something odd. The flight attendants seemed uncharacteristically on edge. One flight attendant, a tall brunette named Bridget, looked Phoenix up and down with a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Another flight attendant, Peter, busied himself with stowing coats, but shot Phoenix a curt glance as she passed him. Finding her seat, 2A, Phoenix placed her carry-on in the overhead bin. She settled into the plush seat and buckled her seatbelt. Her phone buzzed a final email from a major client in Germany, and she typed a rapid response as other first-class passengers filed in. Before she could hit send, a flight attendant hovered over her shoulder. "Ma'am, we'll need you to switch your phone to airplane mode," the attendant said, with a tight-lipped courtesy. "We'll be pushing back soon." Phoenix glanced up and offered a friendly smile. "Of course, just finishing a work email. Won't take more than a second." She tapped the screen a few times, then switched to airplane mode. But by then she could practically feel the attendant's breath on her neck, as if waiting to pounce at any second. It was not the warm welcome she was used to in first class. In fact, it felt downright hostile. She chalked it up to stress. Airline employees had been under extraordinary pressure lately, with new regulations, staff shortages, and increased travel demands. As she tucked her phone away, a sense of unease settled over her. Something was off. She just hoped it wouldn't escalate. Once the cabin door closed and the plane began taxiing away from the gate, Phoenix tried to focus on reading a magazine. The flight attendants demonstrated the safety procedures, seat belts, oxygen masks, and emergency exits, while the overhead lights dimmed. She noticed Bridget, the tall brunette, repeatedly looking in her direction. Phoenix's gut churned with discomfort, but she convinced herself it was her imagination. Soon after takeoff, the fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. A hush fell over first class as the flight attendants prepared to serve drinks and snacks. Phoenix closed her eyes for a moment, reminding herself that she had nearly 2 hours to relax. But just when she had begun to drift, a clipped voice tugged her back to reality. "Ma'am." "Excuse me, ma'am." Phoenix opened her eyes to see Bridget glaring at her. "Yes?" she asked politely. Bridget's face held an uneasy mixture of scrutiny and disapproval. "I'm sorry, but could I see your boarding pass?" "Please," Phoenix blinked. This was unusual. "My boarding pass?" "I'm seated here in 2A, she replied, a note of confusion in her voice. Passengers rarely got asked for their passes mid-flight, especially after they were already seated. "I'm aware of your seat number, ma'am," Bridget replied tersely, eyes flicking to the overhead bin. "But I need to verify your ticket, please." Phoenix tried not to bristle. She had paid for a first-class seat, quite a sum too, and had never been questioned like this. Still, she rummaged in her purse for the boarding pass. She handed the small paper slip over, noticing the attendant's eyes narrow as she read it. "Is there a problem?" Phoenix inquired, struggling to keep her tone calm. Bridget's gaze dropped. "I'll be back shortly." Without another word, she whisked away, leaving Phoenix more bewildered than ever. Nearby passengers stole curious glances, murmuring among themselves. Phoenix caught the eye of an older woman across the aisle, who gave her a sympathetic shrug. The hush in first class grew heavier, as though everyone sensed the tension radiating from the flight crew. In less than a minute, Bridget returned, flanked by Peter. Phoenix sat up straighter. This was alarming. It was one thing for a single flight attendant to question a passenger, but now there were 2 of them. "Ma'am," Peter said, voice curt. "May I see your identification as well?" Phoenix complied, slowly pulling out her driver's license. Her heart hammered in her chest. "Could you please explain what this is about?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her mind raced. She couldn't fathom what the flight crew suspected her of doing. Bridget and Peter exchanged a glance that broadcasted deep suspicion. "We'll be right back," Peter replied, as they took her ID and boarding pass to the galley. Murmurs rippled through first class. Something was definitely amiss. It was around that moment that a nearby passenger, a wiry man in his 50s, wearing a crisp suit, leaned toward Phoenix. "Hey," he whispered, "they're being weird. Did they accuse you of something?" Phoenix's lips twitched in a grim smile. "Not that I know of." Another passenger, a 20-something woman with bright pink hair, glanced over with worry. "I've never seen flight attendants do that to a first-class passenger." "Are you okay?" Phoenix nodded, though she didn't feel okay. She felt singled out, targeted, and under scrutiny for no apparent reason. She tried to breathe through the mounting anxiety. If the flight staff had some issue, they should be transparent. Yet they were tiptoeing around it in a way that felt invasive and humiliating. A few minutes dragged by. Phoenix forced herself to stay calm, but her mind ran through every possibility. Was there a glitch with her ticket? Did someone else have the same seat? Had her credit card not processed, but she had triple-checked all the details? Something else was going on. Finally, Bridget and Peter returned. Bridget's expression was eerily neutral now. "Ma'am, can you come with us to the front of the plane?" "Please?" A wave of heat flooded Phoenix's cheeks. She glanced around, acutely aware of her fellow passengers' watchful eyes. "What for?" she asked, voice shaking despite her best effort to remain composed. Bridget pursed her lips. "It's about your boarding status. We need to clarify a few things." Phoenix felt her pulse skyrocket. Publicly singled out. In first class, she carefully unbuckled, stood and collected her purse. Her heart throbbed with the worst kind of fear. The kind that told her this wasn't a simple confusion, but something deeper, something that might be tinged with prejudice. She had faced her share of microaggressions, but never at 30,000 feet, where the power dynamic was heavily skewed in favor of the flight crew. As Phoenix made her way up the aisle, heads turned to follow her. Whispered speculation, wide eyes, and shared glances amplified her embarrassment. She reached the galley area, her mind screaming for an explanation. "We have reason to believe," Bridget said, crossing her arms, "that there might be an issue with your ticket. The name here," she tapped the ID, "does not exactly match the name in our system." Phoenix frowned. "That's impossible. My boarding pass has my full legal name, Phoenix Aurelia Marshall. My ID is also Phoenix Aurelia Marshall. Everything matches." Peter's arms folded, nodded at a piece of paper with the flight manifest. "Our record here just says P. Marshall, and there's a note that this seat was flagged for potential misuse of frequent flyer miles. We're investigating." Phoenix looked from Bridget to Peter. "That's my personal membership. I used my frequent flyer number for the upgrade. There must be a clerical mistake on your end." Bridget's expression stiffened. "We'll need to verify with the airline's main desk. Until then, I'm afraid we can't let you stay in this seat." A cold wave of dread moved through Phoenix. She was an established professional with a legitimate ticket in her name. Yet here she was, being singled out and threatened with removal. She glanced back down the aisle. Passengers craned their necks, trying to catch snippets of the conversation. She could almost taste the tension in the recycled cabin air. "Let's sort this out," Phoenix said, mustering all the composure she could. "If we're dealing with a clerical error, call the airline desk while we're in the air. Confirm that I'm the rightful passenger. I have the credit card transaction on my phone. My entire booking record is there." But Bridget shook her head. We can't do that while we're airborne, ma'am. We'll have to resolve this on the ground. Peter added, We'll be landing in about an hour and a half. We can hold you in the galley or seat you in economy until then. We can't let you occupy a seat if there's an open investigation into its legitimacy. Phoenix felt her stomach drop. This is ridiculous. I paid for this seat with my own money. I have the receipt. Bridget and Peter exchanged dubious glances. Everything about their posture screamed an assumption of guilt, rather than a presumption of innocence. Phoenix recognized that stance. She had seen it before, in shops where employees followed her around, or at upscale events where people questioned if she was on the guest list. She never expected it to happen on a plane, and definitely not at the hands of flight attendants. Before she could protest further, a crackle over the intercom announced that flight attendants should take their seats due to upcoming turbulence. Bridget, with a faint smirk, gestured for Phoenix to follow her toward a cramped jump seat near the front door of the aircraft. You'll have to remain here until we can land and properly address the issue. Phoenix's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. Peter's stare was ice cold. No arguments, ma'am. Please comply, or we'll have to involve airport authorities when we land. Phoenix felt trapped, cornered, and helpless. She sank into the jump seat, a seatbelt that felt more like shackles strapped across her lap. Every passing moment burned into her memory. She wondered if she should call a lawyer when she landed. Should she create a social media storm? But first, she needed to breathe. The next hour passed in excruciating tension. Turbulence rocked the plane, intensifying Phoenix's sense of entrapment. All she could do was stare at the rivets on the bulkhead, replaying every step of her journey to see if she had made any error. Ultimately, she knew the real error was never hers, and her anger simmered, intensifying with each minute. By the time the captain announced their approach to Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, Phoenix's nerves were frayed. The flight attendants strapped themselves in, ignoring her presence like she was an unwanted object. Phoenix clung to the faint hope that once they landed, the airline's ground staff would see this was all a mistake, and she'd receive some semblance of an apology. But fate had other plans. As soon as the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Bridget quietly informed Phoenix that she would be escorted off the plane first. Phoenix's cheeks flamed as she realized the entire first-class cabin, and likely the rest of the plane, would see her escorted off in what looked like a hush-hush detention. "I've done nothing wrong," Phoenix whispered, her voice trembling with frustration and disbelief. Bridget offered no reply, just a cool stare. When the cabin doors opened, 2 uniformed airport security officers stepped inside, their expressions guarded. Phoenix's heart plummeted. This was beyond humiliating. It was mortifying. Even as she willed herself to stay calm, tears pricked her eyes. She stood, chin lifted, and stepped into the aisle. Passengers watched, some with pity, some with curiosity, and perhaps a few with glee. A baby wailed in the background. The older gentleman who'd tried to talk to her earlier gave her a sympathetic nod, and the pink-haired young woman mouthed something like, "I'm sorry," as Phoenix passed. But the final nail was hammered in when one of the security officers abruptly grabbed her by the elbow. "Keep your hands where we can see them," he said, as if she were some dangerous criminal. Phoenix stiffened, her eyes wide with shock. "Excuse me," she hissed, jerking her arm free. "I'll walk on my own." A flurry of tension crackled around them. Bridget and Peter shrank into the background, content to let the officers handle Phoenix like contraband. She felt their eyes on her back as the security officers led her down the jet bridge. The moment she emerged into the airport's gate area, her ears were met with hushed whispers and gasps from onlookers who watched a well-dressed black woman being marched off a flight by security. It was a spectacle Phoenix never thought she'd star in. Cameras flashed. Someone had taken out their phone. She swallowed the humiliation, her breath coming in short bursts, determined to maintain a shred of dignity. A stoic gate agent from Unity Air approached, a perplexed expression contorting his features. "Ma'am," he began carefully, "we were told there was a possible ticket discrepancy." Phoenix exhaled, feeling tears prickle at the corner of her eyes. "I have all my documents right here," she said, rummaging for her phone and the crumpled boarding pass. "Everything is in order. Check for yourself." The gate agent scanned her phone's booking confirmation, the matching ID, the credit card information. A minute passed as the agent tapped away at his computer. Phoenix's heart thundered while the uniformed officers stood by their presence, a constant reminder of her forced removal. Eventually, the gate agent frowned. "This appears correct, ma'am. I'm not seeing any mismatch or flagged information. The booking is perfectly valid." One security officer arched an eyebrow, confusion etched into his face. But the flight attendants claimed otherwise. The gate agent shook his head. "All the data here is consistent. Let me call my supervisor." Phoenix waited, her fury growing. She thought about demanding an apology on the spot. Where had the flight crew conjured this phony suspicion from? The humiliating fiasco had left her trembling with righteous anger. A few minutes later, the airline supervisor arrived, a middle-aged man named Derek Coleman, with a name badge pinned to his blazer. He listened attentively to the gate agent's explanation. Then he turned to Phoenix, hands clasped. "I'm deeply sorry for the inconvenience, Ms. Marshall. It seems there's been a grave misunderstanding. You do indeed have a valid ticket and an appropriate seat assignment. I'll begin an immediate investigation into how and why this happened." Phoenix squeezed her eyes shut for a second, relief coursing through her. "I appreciate that, Mr. Coleman. But this has done incredible damage to me, public humiliation, being escorted by security as if I were a criminal. I expect the airline to rectify this in every possible way, especially after I was singled out, forced out of my seat mid-flight. I need accountability." Derek Coleman nodded gravely. "I understand. We'll do everything in our power to make this right. We value every passenger, and such treatment is unacceptable. Please allow us some time to investigate. In the meantime, Unity Air will provide a full refund of your ticket and accommodations if you need them." Phoenix swallowed hard, letting the moment settle. Around her, curious travelers kept glancing. She felt exposed, raw, but also empowered by the knowledge she was fully in the right. "Thank you," she managed, voice tight with a mix of hurt and outrage. "I'll be waiting for your full report on what happened." Her mind seethed with the question. Why had this happened? Was it merely a clerical error, or was something else at play? Implicit bias, prejudice, or even blatant racism? Her next steps were clear. Contact her attorney. Contact her PR specialist, and ensure this never happened to another passenger again. The security officers, clearly at a loss, offered lukewarm apologies and drifted back into the crowd, presumably to fill out some tedious paperwork. Phoenix stood there, arms crossed, focusing on her breathing. She repeated in her mind that she was not the one who had done anything wrong, that she would not let them reduce her to a stereotype. Little did she know the humiliations were not yet over, but neither were the twists of fate about to come her way. Phoenix left the terminal and headed straight for a quiet corner of a nearby lounge. She needed to compose herself. She texted her sister, Danielle Delay. "Some drama. I'll explain later." She couldn't imagine unveiling the full humiliating story right now. Then she dialed her assistant, Rowan. "Rowan," she said sharply, stepping into a quieter nook. "I need you to set up a conference call with Alan, the legal counsel ASAP. Also get me Jason from PR on the line." Rowan, who had grown accustomed to Phoenix's calm demeanor, sounded alarmed. "Is everything okay?" Phoenix forced a bitter laugh. "Not even close. But it will be. I'll explain everything on the call." She ended the call, pacing the lounge floor, waiting for instructions to join the conference. Her reflection in the lounge's glass walls revealed a poised professional, wearing a crisp blazer and a white blouse, someone who had just been publicly treated like a criminal. The disconnect fueled her anger, but she also felt a surge of resolution. She'd worked too hard to be diminished by anyone. Moments later, her phone buzzed with the conference line number. She dialed in, breath still unsteady. Alan, her legal counsel, was the first to speak. "Phoenix." "It's Alan. I just heard from Rowan." "Are you all right?" Phoenix inhaled, gathering her thoughts. "I'm safe, but I've just been subjected to a humiliating, baseless security escort off my flight. The airline's ground staff admitted there was no legitimate reason. I want to know my options here, both legal and otherwise." There was a muffled rustle of papers on Alan's end. "We can explore a lawsuit for discriminatory treatment, wrongful detainment, defamation, and emotional distress, depending on the specifics. But first, do you want a public statement, Jason?" The PR guru chimed in. "Phoenix, I can craft a statement if you're considering going public. However, if there's an internal resolution with the airline, we might want to see how that plays out first." Phoenix's mind churned. For so long she'd navigated corporate waters, knowing the importance of strategic moves. She wasn't the type to cry discrimination at every slight. But this was a glaring incident too big to ignore. "I want accountability, but I also want to see how the airline will respond. I've spoken to a supervisor named Derek Coleman." He apologized. "They're looking into it." "Understood," Jason replied. "We can hold a statement in draft ready to go if their response is inadequate," Alan added. "In the meantime, gather everything. Eyewitness testimonies, any phone recordings from other passengers, the flight manifest your ticket receipts. The more evidence, the better." Phoenix nodded, even though they couldn't see her. "All right, I'll do that. Thank you both." She ended the call feeling marginally more in control. Still wearing her persistent frown, Phoenix checked her watch. She was due to meet Danielle soon, but the day's events had left her rattled. She decided to take a taxi to Danielle's place and decompress there. Shouldering her bag, she headed for the exit. But just before she could exit the terminal, her phone rang again. A number she recognized: Sahara Solutions, the global consulting firm she had started working with a year ago, which was in the midst of a major project with a top airline. She took the call, trying to steady her voice. "Phoenix. It's James from Sahara." "Solutions," came the crisp voice on the other end. "Sorry to bother you on a weekend. But we have an emergency meeting regarding the Unity Air account. Something about a crisis in their HR and operations structure. One of our partner teams is calling us in for immediate consultation." Phoenix froze in the middle of the walkway, foot traffic moving around her. Unity Air. The same airline that had just forcibly thrown her off a plane for no valid reason. She took a breath. "I didn't realize we had a direct contract with them. I've been away from the office for a week, so I might be missing some updates." James cleared his throat. Well, we just locked in the deal last night. Unity Air's leadership decided they need our help for a massive internal restructuring. HR compliance, diversity training, the whole 9 yards. They've seen their share of controversies, especially around passenger treatment, apparently. He paused, then added, "Do you think you can join the urgent briefing in about an hour? The entire leadership team of Unity Air is going to be on the call." Phoenix's pulse hammered. An urgent briefing. An hour from now. The timing was unbelievable. She could hardly process the cosmic irony. "Yes," she said slowly. "I'll be there." She ended the call, her mind swirling with the bizarre coincidence. The airline that had just humiliated her was about to become her firm's client. In essence, she'd have authority to recommend changes to their HR flight operations and training procedures. And she was the lead consultant with final sign-off on the project's major decisions. If the universe believed in comedic timing, it had just played its trump card. Phoenix quickened her pace out of the airport, adrenaline surging. She needed to find a quiet spot, a lounge, or even a private corner of the arrivals hall where she could jump on this meeting. She booked a small conference room at the on-site airport business center for the next hour. This was too perfect to pass up. At the top of the hour, Phoenix logged into the secure video conference from the small glass-walled business center. She adjusted her laptop's camera, brushed imaginary lint from her blazer, and breathed deeply to settle her nerves. She told herself, keep it professional. Don't let anger overshadow the big picture. But part of her was itching for retribution. On screen, the leadership team of Unity Air popped into the conference, one by one, CFO, COO, Director of HR, and other executives. Finally, the CEO, a stern-faced man named Victor Ellison, appeared. Phoenix recognized him from business journals. He was known for cost-cutting measures and expansions. She also noticed her own colleagues from Sahara Solutions, James, 2 analysts, and their project manager, Carla. Carla began the meeting. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining on short notice. We're here to initiate discussions on Unity Air's operational challenges, particularly those tied to HR compliance, staff training, and workplace culture. Our lead consultant on this project is Ms. Phoenix Marshall, a senior partner at Sahara Solutions. One by one, the Unity Air execs nodded. Phoenix watched their expressions, curious if any recognized her name or face from the fiasco that had just occurred. Probably not. Airlines were big, and executives often didn't know about on-the-ground mishaps in real time. Carla continued. Phoenix, I'll hand it over to you for introductions and your preliminary assessment approach. Phoenix clicked her mic on. Her heart pounded, but her voice projected calm confidence. Thank you, Carla. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Phoenix Marshall. I specialize in strategic HR interventions, brand management, and crisis resolution. Over the next few months, our goal is to identify weaknesses in Unity Air's operations, especially around staff training, diversity, equity, inclusion, and how frontline employees handle passenger relations. We'll develop a comprehensive plan to address these issues and implement measurable changes. As she spoke, her eyes flicked across the screens, reading the body language of the execs. Some nodded encouragingly, while others looked politely neutral. CEO Victor Ellison offered a tight-lipped grin. We're pleased to have you on board, Ms. Marshall. We've had some unfortunate incidents lately that highlight the need for better policies and training. We're ready to take action. Phoenix's pulse quickened. Unfortunate incidents didn't even begin to describe what happened to her. Still, she maintained her composure. I'm going to be direct. I believe the greatest impact will come from a top-down reassessment. This includes re-evaluating how your flight attendants are trained to handle disputes, how your ground staff processes passenger issues, and how quickly your leadership responds to complaints. We need to ensure accountability at every level. She paused, letting her words settle. With your permission, we'll start with a thorough audit, anonymous surveys of employees, reviews of passenger complaints, interviews with flight and ground crew members. We'll also examine existing protocols for passenger interactions, especially regarding seat disputes, special needs, and conflict resolution. Victor nodded firmly. Absolutely. We want total transparency, and we're prepared to take strong action against any staff found to be violating company policy. Phoenix allowed a measured smile. That's what I like to hear. My team and I will run this program, as we do with all our clients, fair, thorough, and results-oriented. I do want to emphasize that if we find systemic issues, the solutions won't be a quick fix. We'll need your full support for long-term reform. The CFO, a middle-aged woman named Serena Wang, leaned forward. We've allocated a substantial budget to this. Rest assured we're serious about turning Unity Air into a model of customer service. Our brand is on the line. Phoenix's phone buzzed on the desk, ironically showing an alert from a social media post about an incident on a Unity Air flight. She discreetly dismissed it. Then she concluded, "Excellent. We'll set up interviews and begin data collection immediately. I'll coordinate with Carla to finalize the timeline. Thank you all for your trust in Sahara Solutions." The call wrapped up with standard pleasantries, executives exchanging farewells, and the meeting ended. Phoenix stared at her own reflection in the darkened screen for a moment, a swirl of emotions in her chest. She had the keys to the kingdom, now the authority to shape Unity Air's policies. And she had just lived through the perfect example of what was broken. Over the next hour, Phoenix strategized with Carla and James. She insisted that the flight crew responsible for her incident become part of the first wave of interviews, along with the airport supervisor. They agreed, albeit curiously, since Phoenix hadn't disclosed the personal nature of her request. She planned to reveal her own experience only when the timing was right to ensure the truth carried maximum impact. Meanwhile, she messaged Derek Coleman, the airline supervisor, who had apologized to her in Chicago. She requested the names of the flight attendants who had forced her off the plane. Derek provided them Bridget Klein and Peter Lamb. She also discovered that the cabin manager on that flight was Damon Yates, though he hadn't appeared during the fiasco. With these names in hand, Phoenix arranged a private Zoom interview with them, labeling it as a fact-finding discussion on passenger relations. None of them realized that the passenger in question was Phoenix herself. When the call time arrived, Phoenix launched the Zoom link. Damon Yates joined first, looking mildly nervous. Bridget and Peter joined next, each wearing their standard airline uniform Unity Airpins, glinting under harsh home office lights. Their cameras were on. They gave forced smiles. "Hello, Phoenix," said a crisp professionalism coating her voice. "I'm Phoenix Marshall from Sahara Solutions. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me today as part of the operational review for Unity Air." They all nodded. Bridget looked slightly suspicious, perhaps recognizing the name. Peter, on the other hand, seemed oblivious. Damon looked stiff. Phoenix continued. "We're examining passenger treatment protocols, especially in dispute scenarios. I understand there was an incident on Flight 2637 from Atlanta to Chicago involving a passenger who was escorted off the plane for allegedly having an invalid ticket. Could you walk me through what happened from your perspective?" Peter cleared his throat. "Yes, That day we had a passenger in first class whose credentials didn't match up with our system. We followed standard procedure, asked for ID, found discrepancies, and eventually informed security. Phoenix laced her fingers. You said you found discrepancies. Could you specify what those were? Bridget jumped in, voice clipped. Her name wasn't fully displayed in our system, and there was a note regarding frequent flyer miles. When she couldn't provide immediate proof, we flagged her. Also, her behavior was uncooperative. Phoenix fought a derisive laugh. Uncooperative, how Peter squirmed. She was defensive and questioned our procedures. In her mind, Phoenix replayed the humiliating experience. Defensive, they had cornered her with no explanation, forced her out of her seat. She took a steadying breath, and so the final result was to have her physically escorted off by security. Bridget nodded, her eyes flicking away. Yes, that's standard if a passenger refuses to comply. Phoenix let a chilling pause fill the air. I see. Did you eventually discover whether the passenger's ticket was legitimate? Damon, who had been silent until now, spoke up. From my understanding, the airline's desk later found no wrongdoing on her part. We were told there'd be an internal follow-up, but we never heard the final details. Phoenix stared into the camera. Well, you're about to hear them now. That passenger you escorted off. That was me. A silent bomb exploded in the Zoom room. Bridget's eyes bulged, and she covered her mouth. Peter's face drained of color. Damon visibly swallowed, as though he'd just realized the precariousness of his situation. Phoenix let the weight of her words settle. Yes, I am the passenger you forced off the plane without cause. You humiliated me in front of an entire cabin of people, implied I was a criminal, and had security march me through the airport. All of it was based on your quick assumptions, your poor communication, and the inability to verify a perfectly valid ticket. She waited, giving them a moment to respond. No one spoke. They looked stricken. I'm leading this consulting project. Phoenix continued, voice laced with calm fury. And my team has been tasked with evaluating all staff involved in any such incidents. This is not just about me. It's about every passenger who has been mistreated due to snap judgments or discriminatory biases. Peter finally found his voice. Ms. Marshall, we were following protocols. We had to ensure the safety of all passengers. Phoenix held up a hand. Stop. I have already spoken to your supervisors and reviewed your protocols. No such protocol mandates humiliating a passenger with no genuine cause. The incident was deeply flawed from start to finish. Bridget's voice wavered. We're sorry. We were informed by the system. Phoenix's gaze hardened. So you blame the system? Did you make any effort to contact ground control, rescan my ticket, or check with the pilot? Or did you just assume I was an imposter? Damon shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Marshall, with all due respect, we had no idea it was you or that you were a senior consultant. We were just doing our job. Phoenix bit back a bitter laugh. If they had known she was powerful, would they have treated her differently? That's part of the problem, she said. If I had been a well-known VIP, perhaps you would have handled the situation with more care. But as an average passenger, I was disposable to you. Well, ironically, I hold the authority now to decide if you remain employed at Unity Air. Another bombshell. Damon, Bridget, and Peter looked as though the floor had vanished beneath them. Phoenix continued, her voice tightening with conviction. The entire corporate leadership has given Sahara Solutions the green light to implement sweeping changes. This includes staff reassignments, retraining, and yes, terminations. Effective immediately, I'm recommending that each of you be dismissed from flight service responsibilities pending a final review from Unity Air's HR." Bridget gasped audibly, tears springing to her eyes. Peter shook his head in disbelief. Damon pressed his lips together. "I've already spoken to your management," Phoenix added. "Your roles in this fiasco mean you've breached the trust Unity Air must hold with its passengers. Maybe you can find other positions within the company after thorough retraining, but for now you will not be allowed to represent the airline in any capacity dealing with customers." The three employees started speaking at once. Apologies, justifications, pleas for another chance. Phoenix let them babble for a moment before she spoke firmly. "I understand mistakes happen, but this wasn't a minor slip. It involved blatant disregard for proper protocol and a disregard for the passenger's dignity. It was also overshadowed by questionable motives, which from my perspective point toward racial bias. That is something Unity Air cannot and will not tolerate going forward." The call ended with a stunned silence on their part. Phoenix steeled herself and disconnected, her heart racing. She had fired them. Or, more accurately, she had executed the authority entrusted to her by Unity Air's senior management. She had never taken pleasure in terminating employees, but in this case, accountability was mandatory. This was more than personal vengeance. It was a statement that such actions had real consequences. She sank back into her chair, exhaling, letting the aftershock of adrenaline settle in her bloodstream. The memory of being dragged off that plane was still fresh, but now a sense of closure. Partial closure washed over her. News travels fast in the corporate world, especially with an incident as dramatic as forcibly removing a senior consultant who then helms a multi-million-dollar reform initiative. Within hours, gossip and news articles swirled through industry circles. Some passenger on Phoenix's flight had posted a viral video snippet on social media. It showed Phoenix being escorted off the plane with the caption, "Hushed, flying while black businesswoman, booted from first class for no reason." The story caught fire. Online activists rallied to Phoenix's defense, calling for Unity Air to do better. The airline was in full damage control mode, issuing statements of regret and promising an internal investigation. Their top brass sighed with relief when they learned Phoenix Marshall. The Phoenix Marshal was already on the job to help them fix these systemic issues. But the avalanche of events wasn't done. In the days that followed, more passengers came forward with stories of unfair treatment by Unity Air flight crews. It wasn't just about race. Some were about disability access, others about age discrimination. Phoenix realized the rot ran deep, and the airline's brand was teetering on the edge of collapse. She dove headfirst into her work, applying her proven strategies for corporate transformation. She assembled focus groups, engaged stakeholders from all levels, and relentlessly pushed for immediate policy changes. Mandatory bias training was scheduled, new passenger dispute protocols were drafted, and an anonymous hotline for reporting employee misconduct was established. Amid the flurry, Phoenix nearly forgot her own personal pain. The righteous indignation that had fueled her was now channeled into building a better airline. She coordinated daily with CEO Victor Ellison, who swallowed his pride and gave her free rein. Changes were happening fast, yet in the midst of positive reforms, unexpected consequences rippled outward, particularly for Bridget, Peter, and Damon. The airline HR moved swiftly to suspend them, while finalizing termination procedures. On social media, their names were leaked. Overnight, they became pariahs, faces of an ugly corporate scandal. Bridget was bombarded with hate messages online. She tearfully wrote Phoenix an email, pleading that she had only been following orders. She insisted she'd never had a racist thought in her life. Peter, for his part, begged for a second chance, claiming that he had a newborn at home and needed the job. Damon tried to blame the entire fiasco on Bridget, and Peter claiming he was unaware of their actions. Phoenix read their messages in a quiet moment. She felt a pang of empathy. Losing a job is no small thing, and the internet's wrath can be brutal. But she also knew accountability was non-negotiable. They had to face the consequences of their actions. For once, she decided not to reply. She needed time to process. Meanwhile, a wave of airline staff, spooked by the headlines, began meticulously adhering to every protocol, often offering overly polite service to all passengers, an ironic short-term effect of the scandal. Unity Air's top management scrambled to put out daily PR statements about improvements in progress. Passengers posted a barrage of reviews, some praising the airline's sudden push for courtesy, others deriding it as too little too late. Despite being consumed by the crisis project, Phoenix carved out time to finally visit her sister Danielle and her newborn niece. Holding her tiny niece in her arms, she felt a wave of love that momentarily pushed away the corporate chaos. She recounted the entire saga to Danielle, who stared in disbelief. "Girl, you've always been a powerhouse. But to get kicked off a plane and then end up reforming the entire airline. That's next level," Danielle teased, but her tone was tinged with pride. Phoenix chuckled. "Life is funny like that, but it also feels heavy, you know. This is bigger than me. It's about people who don't have my resources or influence, who get unfairly treated every day." Danielle's eyes softened. "Then fight for them. You're in the perfect position to change things." That night, while her niece slept, Phoenix found herself flipping through old photos on her phone, pictures of her younger self at job fairs, scholarships, ceremonies, even her first international flight many years ago. Each represented a milestone she fought for. She thought about how, when she was a teenager, she had once been wrongly accused of shoplifting simply because of how she looked. She remembered the humiliation, the rage, and the sense of powerlessness. Now she was in a seat of power, maybe not unstoppable, but certainly influential enough to forge real change. She resolved that once she completed the airline overhaul, she would expand her philanthropic initiatives. She wanted to create a foundation that funded legal aid for victims of discrimination in travel and hospitality. Too many had no recourse. She could make a difference. Months of hard work culminated in a massive board meeting held at Unity Air's headquarters in Atlanta, just steps away from where it had all begun at Hartsfield-Jackson. The meeting was to unveil the official results of Sahara Solutions' operational review and the recommended reforms for Unity Air's future. Seated around a polished mahogany conference table were CEO Victor Ellison, CFO Serena Wang, COO Harold Burns, various board members, and Phoenix's consulting team. Press and media representatives lingered in the corridors, hungry for updates. Phoenix presented a 90-page deck summarizing the thorough audit. She detailed how flawed protocols, insufficient training, and underlying biases had led to multiple passenger mistreatment incidents. The data was stark. For every 10,000 passengers, there had been a measurable spike in complaints tied directly to staff misapplication of policy. This suggests an unconscious bias at play, she emphasized, as well as a systemic fear of liability that leads to an overreaction. After half an hour of discussion, the board members asked for the recommended solutions. Phoenix clicked to the next slides, explaining the multi-tiered approach. 1. Full overhaul of staff training. Mandatory ongoing training on cultural sensitivity, conflict resolution, and crisis management. 2. Passenger Advocate Program. Each flight would have a designated passenger advocate to mediate issues in real time. 3. Automated verification systems. Upgraded software to cross-check ticket discrepancies, seamlessly and discreetly reducing the need for embarrassing public confrontations. 4. Accountability framework. Clear guidelines on when and how staff could remove a passenger, including immediate managerial oversight of such decisions to prevent power tripping. The board murmured approval. Victor Ellison leaned forward. Impressive, Ms. Marshall. Implementation timeline. Phoenix responded with a confident smile. 6 months for full rollout. Some measures like the new technology may take a year, but you'll see immediate improvements in staff conduct. One older board member, a man named Raymond Holt, cleared his throat. We also understand that certain employees were let go as a result of the most egregious incidents. Are there any plans to rehire them after training, or is that off the table? Phoenix hesitated, remembering the frantic emails from Bridget, Peter, and Damon. She maintained a neutral expression. That decision lies with HR and the executive team. However, in my professional opinion, reassigning individuals who displayed blatant disregard for policy or exhibited bias could undermine the credibility of our reforms. If they do rejoin, it should only be after a significant training and probation period, if at all. Holt nodded, seemingly satisfied. The rest of the board asked a few more technical questions, but it became clear that they had confidence in the plan. Finally, Victor Ellison stood. On behalf of Unity Air, I want to express our gratitude. Phoenix. Your leadership throughout this process has been invaluable, especially given your personal experience that initiated this entire journey. We're committed to ensuring no passenger endures a similar ordeal. Phoenix felt a surge of emotions. She was proud of the changes that were in motion. As cameras snapped from the open door, she gave a final statement. I truly believe Unity Air can become a model for equitable treatment in the skies. Thank you for the opportunity to help steer this transformation. Weeks later, news broke that Bridget, Peter, and Damon, the 3 employees directly involved in Phoenix's incident, had filed lawsuits against Unity Air for wrongful termination. They claimed the airline used them as scapegoats in a PR move. They also named Phoenix Marshall in their suits, accusing her of personal vendettas. The lawsuits garnered media attention, painting a twisted narrative that Phoenix had used her consulting power to exact revenge. For a moment, the public questioned if Phoenix had gone too far. But when the official flight records, passenger testimonies, and even the security footage surfaced, it became painfully clear that these 3 employees had escalated the situation without just cause. In court, the footage revealed Bridget and Peter mocking Phoenix before approaching her seat, with Damon casually indifferent in the background. Statements from other passengers confirmed the flight attendants' hostility. The lawsuits were dismissed. Additionally, in a final stroke of karmic irony, the judge ordered Bridget, Peter, and Damon to pay for the airlines and Phoenix's legal fees, citing the frivolous nature of the suits. Meanwhile, Phoenix's philanthropic foundation focused on providing legal aid to victims of travel-related discrimination, launched with a wave of public support. Donations poured in, including a sizable contribution from Unity Air as part of their brand recovery initiative. And so the story came full circle. What started as a horrific flight that threatened to ruin Phoenix's weekend ended with a sweeping corporate overhaul, an emerging travelers' rights movement, and an affirmation that justice, while sometimes delayed, finds a way to rise. Phoenix, now on a flight to Europe for her next consulting mission, sat in first class, sipping a glass of sparkling water. As she looked out at the clouds, she reflected on how a single moment of indignity had ignited a domino effect of change. She knew there were many battles yet to fight, but for that day in that seat, she allowed herself a small smile of victory. In the end, one woman's humiliation led to a revolution in air travel. Phoenix Marshall's unexpected ordeal lit a fire of change, transforming not only an airline's policies, but also sparking hope in countless travelers who'd felt voiceless for far too long. Through determination, courage, and a fierce commitment to justice, Phoenix rose above prejudice to champion a new standard of fairness. Her stand reminds us sometimes the worst moments of our lives can catapult us into our greatest purpose. If you found this story compelling, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more eye-opening narratives that shed light on hidden truths. Together, let's keep these conversations going and push for equality in every space, be it in the skies or on the ground. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you for watching.